Hi, I am Shannon Wallace. I will be doing my pathological condition on hypobilirubin in infants. I am going to be discussing the ethology, the treatment, and the prevention. Pathological conditions within themselves usually causes change in the body organisms, tissues, and they're the leading causes of death and disabilities in most Americans. It is important when speaking of hypobilirubin to actually break down the process of how bilirubin is made. First, you have to have the red blood cell, which is commonly referred to RBC. It is found in hemoglobin, which breaks down into biliverdin, which is a green-like bile substance, and then is also broken down to bilirubin. Um, Bilirubin is then connected to albumin. I'm sorry, and that is usually what goes through the bloodstream. Hyperbilirubin is most common among infants. It's usually seen with jaundice. That's one of the most indications that people use, and it can be highly dangerous for children. Its initial condition is jaundice, like I said, is a symptom, and then the prolonged condition is kernicterus. That is the most irreversible condition. You don't want your child to get to that point. You want to actually seek medical treatment prior to that. Um, Although bilirubin is a product of heme, it is normally excreted and catabolized through urine, and most infants do not have that ability. And this is what makes it hard for them to get the bilirubin out of their system. As I stated, their production it increases about 50 to 60% more than adults in three ways. They have a high turnover rate for their red blood cells. They have an increased enterohepatic circulation, and then they also have a decreased excretion, which is the whole urine not being able to expel it out properly. When talking about increased um, red blood cells in a child or an infant, they have a shorter lifespans because they're working overtime for the most part. So the breakdown is it releases more of the bilirubin, and it's not actually helping the baby. It's more destroying it if it's not metabolized correctly. It has a decrease in disposal. Um, Infants' immune enzymes are less functional during the first stages of life, and it's significantly less active than adults after the first week. This is what creates the influx to begin with. The interhepatic circulation, it refers to the biliary acid bilirubin drugs and then the other substances that go through the liver. So the liver will metabolize it, and then it will go follow through bile and then the small intestines, which is reabsorbed. But instead of being excreted, it's reabsorbed back into the liver. A lot of infants, if this is happening, they usually have an obstruction in their GI tract. It's usually Meconium ileus or stenosis. And this is also seen in adults with jaundice too, but most commonly with infants. Now, all of these are preventable, but it is also good to catch it at an early age. But if you do not catch it at an early age, you will be prolonged exposed, and there's usually repercussions for that. Prolonged exposure, there's an acronym called BIND, which I will get into later. But for now, it is bilirubin induced neurological dysfunctions. It is when too much albumin is attached to bilirubin and it seeps through the blood-brain barrier. This causes all kind of damage: hearing, brain loss, causes death, mental retardation, and then also the prolonged condition that's associated with is kernicterus, and it is irreversible. Here is a diagram of what can happen if the pathway is not fixed. So here you see the albumin connected. As it passes through the blood-brain barrier, it becomes more dangerous. This is going to affect the spinal cord, neurological transmissions. Usually phagocytosis of the body will happen. It will begin to eat, the cells will begin to eat themselves. Necrosis will happen. The cells will begin to die off. And then kernicterus, which is irreversible, and then eventually it's going to lead to death. So it's not very good to have. It's always better if you can catch it before it gets to this point. More than anything, likely you will catch it before. It does come in 4 stages, which I will be explaining next. The first stage is very, very easy to address. It is an infant that has a failure to latch, which means the child will not latch on to the nipple. It will have poor feeding, high-pitched cry, usually. Most of the children, after this poor latching, the intervention would be to give them a G-tube where they are put on feeding schedules every 2 hours, usually 59 milliliters of either breast milk mixed with formula or just pure formula. This will just help the child pretty much grow while trying to transition. The second stage is muscle dystrophy, or it is paralysis. It also can be characterized by seizures and fevers. It's mostly uncommon for an infant, especially a newborn, to have a fever. It's usually a red flag if that does happen. Most of the children, and I would say about 80%, in stage 2, they pass due to respiratory failure, not actually the kernicterus. So it's pretty interesting that that happens. Stage 3 is asymptomatic. This usually has no signs and conditions. The child is already where they are. They're not progressing. They're not getting worse. And this is usually the telltale sign that it's not going to get better and things are going downhill from here. When it transitions to the 4th stage, it appears after the neonatal period. It's a long-term effect. Like I said, it includes mental retardation, deafness. It's just not good. And if your child does live to the stage 4, usually only 20% are affected by this because the other 80% die of respiratory failure. Different types of treatments are done. Phototherapy is the go-to for most physicians. It is less invasive. It's very helpful, and usually after 3 days under the belly light, which is what they call it, belly babies are usually cured for the most part if it's caught early. Right here, when doing this treatment, it allows the UV light conjugates the lipids, which does in turn flushes out the bilirubin that's inside of the body. So the light does, the vitamin D absorbs the jaundice pretty much. The least likely treatment plan that they use is the exchange of transfusion. Like I said, it's severe. Most physicians do not want to touch this. It is highly dangerous. It is pretty much taking the infant's blood completely, emptying its body, and putting in donor's blood, which is within itself for an infant seems like a lot. It's usually, for the most part, when it's done, it's been a good success rate. It has not been anything where there's death, near death, and usually only certified physicians do it. Prevention, first time you can catch it, the better. Usually present it within 24 hours. You can use vitamin D supplements. It's suggested lots of sunlight. Usually the reason it's caused is because, like I said, the G6PD deficiency, the liver isn't able to conjugate the bilirubin. That's pretty much what happens. But as I said, if you can catch it within 24 hours, more infants will live. When speaking on pathological conditions and prevention, 3 rules is gestational age. It's always good to look at that. A child can have jaundice and be 4 That does not mean they have hypobilirubinemia. It is determined by the hours of life. Usually, if the child is born between 32 to 36 weeks, which is considered preterm, has jaundice for more than 24 hours, less than 48, and usually low birth weight. Those are the things that are looked at. You can also test the blood for the bilirubin and see if it's septic, see what needs to be done prior to actually having to induce the child into the belly lamp or doing the full exchange of the body, of the blood. And those are my references. Thank you guys. Hope you guys learned something. Have a wonderful day.